Okay, welcome everyone to Stories for Hope, Healing, and Belonging, and happy International Women's Day, a little bit belated. Great to have you all here, and hopefully there are some tuning in on Facebook today as well. We're going to share 2 stories today, and we hope you enjoy. So I will turn it over to Ellen for our first story, and I'll share my screen.
Great, thank you. So this story is called Dear Girl, and it's written by Amy Krauss Rosenthal and Paris Rosenthal and illustrated by Holly Hatton. Dear girl, keep that arm raised. You have smart things to say. Dear girl, sometimes you may feel like being pink and sparkly. Sometimes you may feel pretty much the opposite. Dear girl, look at yourself in the mirror. Say thank you to something that makes you, you. Thank you, freckles. Thank you, birthmark. Thank you, red hair. Dear girl, sometimes you just need a good cry. Sometimes you'll need a friend. Sometimes you'll need to be alone. Sometimes you'll need a tissue. Sometimes you'll need a bucket. Dear girl, do you know that there is no such thing as asking too many questions? Who, what, when, where, why, how? Dear girl, write down your thoughts once in a while, even if it's just to enjoy the way your pen feels against the paper. Dear girl, make your room awesome. Make your room you. And while you're at it, make your bed. Dear girl, don't ever lose your sense of wonder. Dear girl, sometimes you just gotta stop and dance. Dear girl, find people like you. Find people unlike you. Dear girl, create traditions, fun, crazy handshakes, and silly inside jokes. Dear girl, if your instinct is telling you to say no, you know, no. Dear girl, coloring outside the lines is cool too. Dear girl, there are no rules about what to wear or how to cut your hair. Dear girl, you know what's really boring? When people say how bored they are. Dear girl, listen to your brave side. Gosh, I don't know. I've got this. Dear girl, you won't be invited to every single party on the planet, which is really okay. Could you imagine how exhausting that would be? Dear girl, a tree trunk is the perfect place for quiet thoughts to be thunk. Dear girl, whenever you need an encouraging boost, remember, you can turn to any page in this book. Most of all, dear girl who I love, know that you can always, always, always turn to me. Thanks, Anna.
Lovely. Thank you, Ellen. A beautiful book. I can't wait to talk more about it in a few moments. So now I'll share my screen and we're going to play a recording of Wild Berries. Can you hear?
Wild Berries by Julie Flett.
When Clarence was little, his grandma carried him on her back through the woods to the clearing to pick wild berries.
Minsa.
Grandma carried a bucket and sang. Now Clarence carries his own bucket and walks behind his grandma.
Cookum.
They sing together. Blueberries dot the clearing. Grandma checks for bears.
Musqua.
They pick the plumpest berries they can find and drop them into their buckets.
Otaskigua.
Grandma likes sweet blueberries.
Inimna.
Soft blueberries, juicy blueberries. Clarence likes big blueberries, sour blueberries, blueberries that go pop in his mouth. Clarence and his grandma pick blueberries for a long time.
Kinwees.
They eat so many
Michit.
berries that their lips turn purple. An ant
Ayagos.
crawls up Clarence's leg. It tickles. A spider
Ochipigesis.
makes its web. A fox
Magisis.
sneaks by. When the buckets are full, Clarence lays a handful of berries on a leaf for the birds
Piasisac.
and the other animals of the woods. They say, "Thank you."
Kinanaskoptanan.
Clarence and his grandma walk back through the woods
Sagak.
with their buckets full of berries. The birds sing
Nikamuak.
in the clearing.
Thank you, Julie Flett, for sharing your story. Thank you to all of you that are listening.
Check out this Verbo.
Oh, man.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, don't like how the automatic ad gets played right after. Anyway, yeah, such beautiful stories. I just love the wisdom that is just echoing through both stories and passing on the knowledge from one generation to another. I really felt like that first story could have been written by my mother. It really feels like that kind of that passing on of wisdom and so many familiar, both like familiar stereotypes that I've had to break through within my own life, but then also so much wisdom that's been passed down that feels very familiar messages as well for those who've had the wonderful experience of having strong, wise women in their lives. And then I think the next book as well speaks to that beautiful passing along of information and wisdom from one generation to the other and that deep relationship between the generations.
Yeah, that second book really reminded me of baking with my grandmother, just that experience, something you really remember. And that's so strong. And like even today, when I still make pie and use her dough recipe, like I feel that connection to my grandmother. That story really reminded me of that.
What's resonating with others?
I was just going to follow up with what Ellen said, that's the second story, Wild Blueberries. It made me think about all of the values too in Indigenous culture around the elders' knowledge and sharing and passing that on to future generations. I thought about how they were sharing language of their culture, that whole idea of how nature feeds them, but then they feed back to nature. So feeding back to the animals. Like I thought that was just really beautiful, all those themes. And then in the first one, as you were reading that, Ellen, I was thinking about I love spoken word poetry, and it made me think of Sarah Kay's poem, If I Had a Daughter, just sharing that knowledge down. Yeah, and again, that little girl, just even those first few pages, how they talked about everybody they look differently, and thinking about myself as a child and even as an adult, you're always thinking, oh, I wish I was less, I had less weight on me, or I wish I had no, curly hair or whatever. We always wish what we don't have. And yet that message about we're all different, and it's important to cherish that and acknowledge that. Yeah.
Becky, when you said a spoken word poet named Sarah, I thought you were referring to this poet last night, Sarah Lewis, who shared just a beautiful, powerful, emotional, amazing, like just fuel for your fire kind of poem last night at the Kawartha World Issues Center
Oh, is it
International
on?
Women's Day event. They did record it. I'm hoping it will be shared. Yvonne, do you know? Yvonne was the lovely MC.
Yeah, I think they will be sharing it on the YouTube channel.
Okay, great.
It was a great night for anyone who wants to go and check that out.
Maybe while I'm unmuted, I'll just jump in. I thought about that page where it said, seek out others that look like you and others that don't look like you. One of the questions last night came from a parent of a 6-year-old daughter who was asking the panelists about what they would suggest when young women don't see themselves in the leaders that are that are around them. If they are BIPOC, or if they come from a different culture and they don't see themselves represented, what would you encourage them to work towards? And it feels like there's lots of good advice in this book about not caring about the boxes that people put you in, but to really forge your own path and go through that. The second book, Wild Berries, many of the same thoughts that Ellen, Hannah, and Becky have already shared, but also with International Women's Day, the role of women in sustainability and Mother Earth as really, the one that we're learning from, and that we should be thinking much more about as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing these two books.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I really, about the first book, I really enjoyed how it created a lot of safety and safe spaces for women, and finding our sense of belonging in different spaces is really important to how we further our lives and mature. And the second one and the first one kind of went together, because it was all about finding and speaking our truth as women and sharing the stories that we have as women. And I really enjoyed in the second book how it talked a lot about berries, and berries are the women's medicine, one of them, which is really important. Yeah, and I think it has a lot of important aspects to growing as a woman, and how we need people with us, but we also need to create a safe for love within ourselves, especially as young women. There's so many things that we go through, and so many different areas of growth. And each thing in the first book is something we learn, I think, and bring with us, and it's something we should learn young. Thank you.
I really enjoyed both of the books. And speaking first to the first book, Dear Girl, for me, it was really about having the freedom to be yourself, and rather than conformity. And as we grow up, and the different areas that we do conform, whether we're told to or we just given those messages. So I thought I really loved that, and especially when it spoke about dear girl, keeping that sense of wonder. And I thought that really that you're keeping your spirit alive and that sense of wonder. And it really tied into the second book, the wonder that the child saw, when he was out picking the berries, and that, whether it's the ants crawling up the legs, or looking at the birds, and the fox, and it's all of this sense of wonder that's just naturally there with with children and with the world, and when we allow it to happen. I thought it was very interesting in the second book. It just naturally happens, with the grandmother bringing the child out to pick the berries and passing on that tradition and allowing that freedom of sense of wonder. Whereas in the first book, it has to be kind of spelled out, that, but keeping that wonder. So I thought it was very interesting seeing wonder being shown in different ways. So yeah, again, I love both of the books. They're beautiful.
Yeah, what a lovely pairing you chose, Mel. Thank you. They work so beautifully together. Wonder is one of the big things that emerged for me as well. And just whenever I do pause to just look around, if I'm outside, something will captivate me. Like wonder is all around us. And so it's kind of like my daily reminder as I go for a walk to just try to witness the wonder. But you're right, like it's interesting how it's something that, I don't know, in my culture, like I grew up on the land, but it's still something that I have to stop and think about. And so I always think back about when did that happen, where I had to notice wonder as opposed to just experiencing it. And just thinking about that as in the early childhood sector, about how do we foster that sense of wonder to be a lifelong, like I like to think that I do still carry it with me. It may not be quite as natural, but how do we help children to continue to carry that wonder with them throughout their whole lives, and to just have that be one of the things that keeps them grounded and keeps them feeling like themselves.
I'd like to know if there's a Dear Boy book, because I feel like a lot of those messages in Dear Girl would be the same for Dear Boy. And sometimes books don't address that with boys, like those, like Rihanna said, like having that safe space and reading through that book and those reminders that, you can be your own safe space. And this is a book you can revisit when you need those moments of hope or uplifting. So yeah, I'm going to Google that after if there's something similar for boys.
Find that out for us, Ellen.
Yeah, as a mother of two boys, I thought of that as I was reading, because I thought, oh, these are messages I would give to my boys as well.
Yeah, there is, the author does write in another book called Dear Boy.
Okay.
We don't have, I haven't read it, but I know that there is a Dear Boy. So I think it would be very similar. Again, it's giving really the freedom and encouraging children to be free and to have those, to create that wonder and not be that, rather than the conformity. I think this book just kind of broadens things up when it says, even remember coloring outside of the lines, let's free ourselves up, and not policing ourselves in such a manner. So it'd be interesting to read.
Well, and just thinking about that from the perspective of boys as well, and girls, how the author in the first book talked about, you're going to have different feelings and it's okay to express them. I think that is such an important message. And I feel like both books had really strong themes of self-regulation in them too, like how to support our own self-regulation. And thinking about how we often, as educators and parents, sometimes don't want those feelings in our children, right? Because they're kind of inconvenient sometimes when we're busy and have a schedule or a transition to do. And so being able to acknowledge and help children label feelings and know that they're okay, I think that was a really important message. And the other part that really stuck with me with that first book too, and just kind of bounces off what Rihanna was saying, was just that whole idea of gut instinct, because I think that I'm someone who's always had a strong gut instinct, and I've had friends that haven't, or maybe just haven't listened to their gut instinct. And sometimes I've heard people criticize others for relying on that because you don't have any hard data. So I think that's a really important message and something we probably don't talk about enough. So I thought that was interesting.
There's so many more places we could go with all of these. I'm just thinking about, someone brought up the idea of, oh, Yvonne, you were talking about the idea of surrounding yourself by people who are like you and are unlike you. And that was another theme that's emerged this week. There were so many things that spoke to me in the story from just this week, but we were talking about that within Compass and how we want to really make an effort to follow different people on social media to try to hear authentic stories from people who might be outside of the normal group of people who we hear from. And so that was another suggestion. And I wonder if we want to share some of our favorite accounts, social media platforms on our Facebook page to kind of refer people to some good voices. I know the Conscious Kid is one. I think we might have talked about that previously, but it's a great place for children's content and educators and parents content. But yeah, I just wondered if people want to share some other suggestions on our Facebook page at some point.
Yeah, I'll maybe add, Hannah, that it's actually a good skill to have, perhaps, to have different perspectives and to come to one's own conclusion, but to, what do you call it, peaceably disagree and respectfully disagree, and that accept that there is a diversity of opinions if there's no harm that's being caused. So I really appreciate that you raised that.
Another tool that we use on that point is it's called the thinking lens, and it goes through all of the different, well, many perspectives that you could be considering. And so if you don't have those perspectives at the table, we will ask ourselves, like if there aren't parents at the table when we're having a conversation, we'll say, what would the parents' perspective be? And we always try to think about an issue from a variety of perspectives and take time to go through that protocol to really think, are we missing anything? Any other thoughts that are lingering on people's hearts and minds this morning?
Just when you were talking about the thinking lens, I think the big one on that for me is what are my own biases that are showing up, right? And I've been thinking about that. This is a little off topic, but just even in with the war that's happening in the Ukraine. I've been asking myself some hard questions about that. So it's an interesting tool to use to think a bit deeper about a situation.
Absolutely. I actually think that the thinking lens has been adapted. I'm just going to see if I can find it, but I think it's been adapted through like a Jedi lens. So if I can find that, I'll share it out as well. Okay, well, we have 5 minutes left. So I think that's just enough time to share another version of one of the stories from this morning. We have a musical version of Wild Berries. So I'll share my screen again. I'll put it up for anyone who has to leave. Please feel free to pop out. I know there's some that have meetings right at 11:30, but otherwise feel free to stay and enjoy this musical version of Wild Berries. Thanks everyone for coming. Take care and we'll see you next month. Find it, sorry. Okay. Sorry if my dog makes noises in the background. Oh, it's not making noise. There we go. Wow, that was very interesting. I feel like children might have a really fun time doing something like that with that story. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the
Thank
rest
you,
of the day.
Hannah. See you next month.